Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Mindset Matters. My name is Victoria, your host, and today I'm joined by my friend Felipe, who is the founder and CEO of Quest, which is an online learning community where kids learn the skills to thrive in the future. So, Felipe and I actually met working for an educational startup back in 2021, I want to say. We worked for a company called Synthesis. And we recently reconnected. Felipe reached out, and he's actually the one who introduced me to Andre, who I did a podcast with a few months back, if you listened to that one. So we decided we needed to catch up, and Felipe had the idea of doing it as a podcast together, which I thought was great. So yeah, this is going to be a good one about kind of mindset, education, learning, business, and all of those things. So welcome, Felipe. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Thanks, and yeah, definitely recommend the podcast with Andre. I listened to it and I loved it.
Yeah, that was a fun one. So I'd love to just hear a little bit about you. What's your story? What's your background? Kind of what has brought you to maybe the space you are in education? Anything that you kind of want to share about you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a long story, but I'll try to keep it brief. The way I think about sort of my childhood or like how I got to where I'm right now, um, is through this lens of my dad is a diplomat, so I ended up kind of being in all kinds of countries and all kinds of schools at a very early age. So I didn't really go to school in the UK in England, but my sister started school there, so that was my first experience with like a different country and like a school. That was like kindergarten, even just pre-K. Then in Germany, I was there for almost 5 years, and that's where I really, started my like education and my life really. I mean, my memories that I can remember. Then we went to Russia actually, only for a year, but very different country, very different culture, very different education system and values and all those things. Um, then Ecuador, and then eventually we came to Canada. I lived in the U.S. after that for a little bit, but that was my main like educational upbringing
Wow.
kind of journey. And yeah, and it is fascinating because just being in different places and different cultures and different schools really gives you like an interesting lens. Uh, all cultures, all schools, all education systems think they have certain things right, and there's some overlap, but there's also a lot of things that are very different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that just like I spent a lot of time as a kid just sitting there. I was a very strange child, just like staring at the wall and thinking about, like what is education? Like why did that other country think about these things completely differently,
Mm.
and this country thinks about them like that? And it was very weird. I was very introspective. At some points, I was maybe a little crazy. Like at one point, I thought, like, are humans even real? I was like into like simulation theory before it became like
Okay.
interesting. Um, but yeah, I very early on, like my earliest experience with school, I remember was me going sort of into the first grade or kindergarten. No, this was first grade in Germany. And one of the earliest experiences I had was they wanted us to sing this like alphabet song, right? They were
Mm-hmm.
like, we're going to learn the alphabet. And I just sort of refused. This was like the first or second day. I was like, no, I don't want to, like, this is ridiculous.
Okay.
And that
Interesting.
just, yeah, very, I don't know why, but
Usually the kids love the songs. That's like my favorite part of teaching. If I've when I've taught younger students, the best part is that you can get away with anything because they'll just sing a
as
song
long as
and
it's in
it'll
song.
yeah, like yeah, they'll do it if we sing about it.
I think it was something about I asked like why is it a song or why is it this or why are we starting with the alphabet? I was just sort of critical, um, and like the answer was something along the lines of all students get these answers, which is like just because you just have to do
Yeah.
it because you have to do it, and having like that so early on, I rebelled like very intensely, and that carried through all the way even past university. I was just like a rebel. I always wanted my own agency, my own decisions. Never really wanted to be told what to do or what to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically with learning, I always had a very deep relationship with wanting to understand the world. Maybe because I was in different countries and different places, but I sort of felt like that was a very precious like thing that was my own. I didn't want other people to mess with it too much,
Mm-hmm.
for maybe the right reasons and also the wrong reasons. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
Um, but a lot of my like view of the world was shaped a lot in that. My parents, to some extent, um, for good reasons and for bad reasons, they had me when I was very young. They didn't have a good relationship with each other, but they were completely hands off with my like academics or with my school. Meaning they never checked homework. I don't even really think they gave the school like their correct phone number. You know, like there was never
Wow.
like
Okay.
a call from a teacher or anything. They didn't really go to
Mm-hmm.
like the I don't know, whenever you meet the teacher, the parent-teacher conferences. I could fail or do amazing, and they would have not known. And I liked
Mm.
it like that. A few times when they asked about, how's it going, I was always like, no, 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 this is kind of my business. Like my education is
Mm.
my business, which is very strange for like a
Super
10 or 9 or
strange.
11 year. Yeah,
Well, just interesting because usually some of the challenges we have as teachers is the parents who are super hands on, almost too involved. And we almost
right,
want them to give their child space to kind of figure it out. Or even with synthesis, that was a big thing of like, we didn't
right.
want the parents in the room because we wanted the kids to just be able to have the experience themselves and not feel that over the shoulder kind of parental pressure. Would you say that your parents kind of viewed you as like this intelligent child and like knew that you were doing okay so that they weren't that interested in like your education, or do you think it had to do with you moving around so much that they were just like they knew it was
Mm.
all these different systems and that everything is kind of arbitrary in that way so that they were hands off, or something else?
Yeah, I think it was a mix of those two things. So yeah, they knew I was gonna be okay, sort of no matter what. But it was also just a bit like neglectful.
Okay.
Like they just didn't. I don't know. They were a little bit like focused on themselves. They were still young. They were still trying to like build up a career or make some money. So they
Mhm.
didn't have that much, I guess, bandwidth to pay attention to me and my education. Although they did care
Okay.
a lot. So it was just. But no, it was a mix. And then obviously the moving different school systems and different situations like doesn't help. You
Yeah.
don't build a relationship with any given teacher or any given school or anything like that. It gave me more leeway to get away with things, just saying like, oh, this school does it differently, no homework, just complete
Yeah.
lie or something.
Yeah, that's fair. In your educational experience, do you feel like there's a system or like a memory you have of a school that you really enjoyed, and like what made that stand out? Or did you feel like, I mean, you said you kind of rebelled against it anyway, so was it just like a challenging
hmm
experience all over?
Um, that's a good question. So for the most part, after being in Germany, I sort of became like a German child. I only spoke German, even though my family is originally from Ecuador, from South America, and they speak Spanish. When I was a young kid, I didn't even speak Spanish. I didn't speak my mother tongue. My mother tongue became German. So then when
Wow.
we went to Russia, and even when we went to Ecuador, we stayed in this sort of private German education system. That was very intense, very hardcore, very like high achieving, like high like academics. So that was like the main school system I was in at a young age. And then when we came to Canada, um, my parents assumed, they were like, Canada, almost every country has like especially the capitals have a German private school. Ottawa is like one of, I think now maybe they do, I don't know, but was one of like two that didn't. So it was a complete like accident that we came here. They just assumed there was one, and there wasn't. So then my parents were like, okay, what are other like private schools, or like how else could we make this happen? And they looked, and it was like way too expensive. So they put me in a public school here, which was a crazy shock. It was so different. It was like crazy. Like even from going from country to country to country, there was nothing that was as like drastically different as like my previous schooling and then like public school, which felt like crazy, especially because I didn't speak the language. I didn't speak English. But did I like any schooling system or system more than another? Not really. I think for the most part, what I liked is relatively consistent, which is the what I disliked is relatively consistent, which is the like sit down, do your work, context switch every like hour or so, like don't go really deep into anything. You don't really have any input into like what the curriculum is or what the projects are that you're jumping into. So that was kind of my beef with it a little bit. And I did get really into chess, so that was my outlet at a young age, and that sort of became my world, and that was like sort of what where I achieved or where I my like I could what do you call it, my intellectual outlet, and that maybe like excused a little bit my to myself mostly because my parents didn't really know too much, but the fact that like I wasn't that into school, I was like okay, but chess is sort of my world. This is where I'll achieve something great.
That's so interesting. And actually, I listened to a podcast that my friend did today, and she was talking with one of her friends who's like an older woman. So kind of they were talking about like their age, kind of an age gap friendship. And with this older woman, she was originally from Italy, but her husband's American and they ended up living in Switzerland. So their children were raised in Switzerland. And it kind of, they talked about this whole like identity thing of people who've moved around a lot or have this like, you have your culture, you have your background. Like for me, I'm Canadian, but like, okay, I could say my dad's family is from England, my mom's from Italy, but like, yeah, I might say, oh, I'm Italian or I'm this, but like, I've never even been there. So it's like at the root of everything, like I'm Canadian. But do you feel like you've had this interesting experience with identity like that because you've just moved around so much? Like when someone asks you, what's your background? Is it kind of like this whole big long story that you have to get into, or what is your answer to that?
Yeah, I still don't know.
Okay.
I don't speak any language perfectly or like without an accent. I don't really know where my like home country is. So it's hilarious,
Interesting.
but no, it's
Yeah.
definitely a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which I sort of enjoy to some extent. I feel like I'm a bit of a child of the world or of the internet or something,
Yeah.
like a global kid.
Okay, that's super cool. And so now you
hmm
work in education, you run your own company that is kind of in the alternative education space,
hmm
and you have a very ambitious goal, which is to be the greatest non traditional education platform. And I think it's great that you have this mission. And so, can you tell me a little bit about, like why is this your mission? What has kind of led you to want to create this business? And yeah, like what are you doing to kind of hopefully achieve that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I mean, really, the big why comes from clearly a very personal experience. I've been fortunate just working at just in education at different startups. I've been fortunate enough to meet kids very much like me when I was a kid. Sometimes even more ambitious or more like weird in the best sense of the word. More interested, really passionate about certain topics, and they clearly just need to devote a lot of time to that topic. I've met a lot of really, really interesting kids and families. The parents sometimes are also really fascinating, especially when they're doing interesting things with their education, if they're doing some kind of hybrid homeschooling or online schooling thing, or when their kids are gifted and they have no idea how to, like how to channel that energy and that drive. So the why comes from there. It's like, okay, I know for a fact, I know me better than anybody, and I know many kids that have a similar experience. And I know what I wanted at the time, which was to build real skills and sort of interface with the real world as much as possible. That was my big frustration as a kid. It was that I felt like if you grab me, and this maybe sounds crazy, but if you grab me and like plop me in some university where at the time I thought like all the like good stuff happens, like the where cancer is cured and where everything happens, I felt like if you just grabbed me and threw me in there and we're like, okay, we're building some real things, we're like doing some real research, where we have a real goal, that somehow, maybe not for the first few months, but eventually 6 months, 1 year later, I would be able to contribute. And I had that feeling at a very, very young age. And it was sort of reinforced by the fact that I was beating like 40-year-old and 30-year-old like chess masters and stuff. So I was like, okay, these adults, they're not necessarily any smarter than any kid, right? So like kids can contribute. I don't know how I feel about that today. I don't know if I should have been grabbed and plopped into some university. I don't know if that would have been the best. But that feeling and that frustration or that ambition of wanting to do things in the real world and getting real skills is something that was very much there. Eventually, I even stopped playing chess because I saw like the grandmasters and the most successful people in the world when I was in Russia. And I was like, these people are not that happy. They're not that successful. Like if you just saw them walking on the street, you wouldn't necessarily think like, oh, I aspire to be like them. They were just really good at chess. And then I sort of switched over to thinking, okay, well, who are the people that are changing people's lives, that are affecting millions of people, that are doing good things? And I found some great entrepreneurs that were doing things like that. And that's when I knew, like at a young age, I was like, okay, I need to be an entrepreneur. And specifically, I wanted to build things in education. So I'm kind of living my dream now, which is good. um, yeah, and then with regards to Quest, so that's the why. It's like the idea is eventually to, I think, if you can satisfy the like learning needs and if you can engage these students that are very hard to engage and have very high standards for their education, then those learning experiences do translate over to almost anybody. At least that's the thesis right now. But our early focus is, okay, let's build some really high quality learning experiences, some really engaging, really real world, real skills where you know and you see them in a context that, okay, I can apply this to other things in the world, or I will be able to apply those things in the near future, and build those for kids that are ambitious, that are creative, that think outside the box. Um, so yeah, that's the why. That's what we want to do. And then like how we're doing it, what we're doing is we're building game simulations. So these like complex simulations where kids in teams play these games. They think they're just playing games with their friends, but really they're interfacing with concepts and skills that are really powerful. So we think about them as like the highest leverage skills for the future, and I can talk about what those are. But but really we want them to be applied. We want them to be real world. We want them to fit within realistic scenarios. Even if it's a game, you can make it more like the real world. So you can have like we have like a mining game where you're optimizing and making decisions based on automating things and increasing your profit with the mining, but also reducing certain environmental costs and things like that. So making things realistic, and then we design in some concepts that we don't lecture to the students. We don't tell them, hey, like this game is about this. Let me explain it to you first, and then you can play. The kids just go in and play, and then often they discover these things. So in one of our games where the kids are collecting certain points and they're exploring this landscape, recently, a couple weeks ago, we introduced some data and some information on the side. And the kids, without even understanding what the word expected value is or that that's a thing, they figured out this idea, this almost like trick, this hack to the game that is expected value. And they figured that out by themselves. These are 8, 9, 10-year-olds. And it's amazing. And then you as the coach, as the facilitator, as the adult can just say, by the way, in case you're interested, like this is what scientists or engineers call expected value. And it's so incredible. It's so amazing because they figured it out by themselves. They feel real ownership and agency over it. They understand it at a much deeper level than if they would just memorize it or they knew it as a fact. And anyway, so that's sort of that's the setup, that's the product, building these team simulations, and then we sort of we design in these high leverage concepts into the games. And I know that's what I would have wanted as a kid, and we're having some good feedback from the students. I mean, the students love it. They like playing. They want to spend more time playing them, and they do discover these concepts. So they don't completely stay hidden. They do figure them out almost too quickly. We can't design as fast as they can discover them.
I know. Isn't it interesting too? Like when you put someone in an environment where they can just go and they're not constrained to the task at hand. Like it is really cool to see like how quickly they develop. One problem I was reflecting on, like for me as a teacher and just being in like the public education space, and something that's frustrating for me to see, especially having experienced a job like Synthesis, which is, I guess for anyone listening, another educational platform where students are playing games, or at the time it was students playing games. We would facilitate their learning, and it was all about collaboration, communication, and real world skills, but learning how to do that in a way that they're still learning stuff and able to learn it themselves. But going back to what I was trying to say, a problem I think with public education is everything just moves so slow. And even thinking back, if you look at a classroom 50 years ago and you look at a classroom today, what has changed with like the physical layout of a classroom? Like obviously I'm sure you've experienced different education systems are doing things differently. And I've seen some great things in like Canadian schools of trying to make it more student centered and trying to make it where it's project based, or you're working backwards, or okay, instead of trying to hit all the little nitty gritty curriculum points, think of the big ideas and let the students kind of lead it. And I think these are great ideas, but when it comes down to it, it's like there's so much we're expected to do, and that makes things move so slow, but the world is moving so fast. And so I feel like it's important that we have these other educational platforms, and it's almost necessary to give students another outlet to learn if they're ready to learn at a higher pace. Like there's so many students, there's like, especially public education, there's so many levels of students in one classroom, and it's like impossible, as much as you try, it's impossible to cater to everyone's needs when the classroom sizes are as big as they are, when we have as much as we're supposed to teach, and we have an hour again to do one subject, and then you move on. And it's just an interesting system that I think, having seen the other side of what is possible for students and how much they can thrive, it's like how do we make this like super accessible for everyone? How do you know what program's right for you? Like there's so many different companies now that offer these types of services.
Everybody in the school system, like if you talk to any individual person, they all want to change things, they all want to innovate it, but all their hands are a little bit tied. So it's this really unfortunate situation where everybody wants to improve things, but it's hard because, like you said, you need to do so much. So it'd be sort of like having like an app that did like all your apps, right? Like if there was one company that was your banking company and your text messaging company and they did everything, it'd be really difficult. But instead we have a bunch of services. We have an entire marketplace of services, and that works really well because then you have competition, and then if one is better than the other, you decide, or one's more for you than another, you decide that one is the one that you're going to use. It actually, like, just to back up a little bit. So yeah, Victoria and I met at Synthesis. And Synthesis was like at the time was like the like most innovative and cool like alternative education company at the time. And Victoria's like maybe the third or fourth teacher there. Like you were one of the earliest people there, like right when they started. So I don't know if your listeners know, but you're sort of like a education pioneer, really.
I'm a trailblazer. I didn't even know it. Yeah, it's so funny because
no, you are.
It's funny that, so the way I found Synthesis was actually super random. So I was living in France at the time as an au pair. So I was living with a family, and it was obviously still COVID times. So I was finding like I just didn't have enough to occupy me, and I was feeling a bit like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have come here. It was COVID. Like I kind of took this chance, and I knew, it could work out or not or whatever. I was just trying to make the best of it. But my dad actually got this email from this newsletter that he follows, and one of the companies advertising that they were hiring was Synthesis. And he forwarded it to me. He's like, this kind of seems like it might be up your alley. So I looked into it, and I was like, this seems really cool. Like, what is this? So I did all this research. I applied to get an interview. They were going to interview me. So I was like, I'm going to be ready for this interview. It was super new. I had never experienced even like a startup culture before. And like I was very new to kind of like the business startup world because I had just gone to university, gone to teachers college, started teaching. Going to France for a year was kind of a break to figure out like, I don't know, just be like, I don't want to jump fully into my career yet. I want to experience the world a little bit. So starting Synthesis, it was good because I had that time on my hands too where I wasn't fully working full time. And so I really got to dive into that world. And yeah, like it was a pretty cool place. And you got hired also pretty early on. But it's interesting to feel like, when I would converse with different Synthesis people and like meet for the first time, like, oh, when did you start? Like that was a common question, right? And I would always be like, oh, yeah, like 2021, maybe February, March. And everyone's like, whoa, right at the beginning. And it's like, yeah, it just kind of found me, and like, it was a super cool thing, but it was honestly really cool to see the growth of the company and see it start from like this thing on Zoom with this one little game to even just how complex the games got. And I think it really helped me grow as a person just to see education differently too. And even to see how we could use games in education and really gamify life, and how like we should be having, there's so much experience in like different types of games, and I hadn't really been a big video game type person for myself. So yeah, it was really interesting, but that's kind of the rundown.
But it's cool. I think I told you this already, but when I joined, I watched you teaching as like the training videos.
So weird.
Like I watched like entire classes of you like just facilitating and running the sessions just to like prepare for it.
Interesting. That's so funny because I knew that I was going to be having people come in and watch like live. I don't know if I actually knew people were watching my whole classes as training. That's kind of scary to think. But I mean, obviously thank you. Yeah, obviously like my background was like, okay, I'm really good with the kids and I know how to facilitate and like teach the class. So even if I'm not super technical, like I can learn that stuff. And a lot of the games, it was fun to see how the kids would learn and pick up on things. And I feel like some of them, I'm like, you guys are way smarter than me. Like, I wouldn't have even known certain things, or it took me way longer to figure it out. But I think that's what's, again, so cool is seeing these kids' minds. And, like, some of them are just so brilliant. And, yeah, being able to kind of facilitate that for them was really cool.
Yeah.
I'd like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Me. If you are looking to build positive habits that you can actually stick to, you're ready to feel more aligned in your life, you're excited about building confidence in yourself and your ability to handle life's challenges, the Mindset Mastery Program could be just what you need. This coaching program is tailored to elevate your mindset and life by guiding you in transforming your thoughts, language, and behaviors to embrace a more intentional and purposeful life. Get ready to feel confident and appreciative of who you are, face life challenges with ease, and work with a coach who is focused on your well-being and encouraging you every step of the way. So if you are serious and ready about tapping into the power of your mindset and transform your life, click the link below or visit mindsetmatterswithvic.com to learn all about it. Thank you, me, for sponsoring this episode. Let's get back to it. Now, I do want to ask you, as a business owner and just someone who's always been in the entrepreneurial kind of mindset of knowing you wanted to kind of have your own path, I guess, what advice would you give someone who kind of has a vision, they're starting their own business, they're wanting to get it off the ground? You might be speaking directly to me here, which I can share with you later. But yeah, like, what's your advice for the whole, like, entering the business world or entering your own space? Like, not necessarily within, you know, what you're doing, but just as a general sense.
Yeah, that's a big question. I love the question because we can talk about this after, but entrepreneurship, personal growth, learning, I honestly view them as the same thing. I like equal sign to all of them. Something that you mentioned is you might learn something from like a bad investment as an adult, which is true. You might, but also you might not. And I'm including myself in this. I think I've gotten the wrong lessons from many decisions I've made, or I've made mistakes and thought that I learned something, and then years later realized, oh my God, the lesson that I thought I learned was actually wrong. This is an area where simulations or like condensed environments where you can make a bad investment 20 times in an hour versus one time over 4 years give you a lot more intellectual honesty and give you a lot more information to see what is the truth behind like what you did wrong or what you did right and all these things. So that's why simulations are actually even more powerful sometimes in the real world, because you can get real experience with something many times. If you buy some stocks right now and then the market goes down, you don't know if it was a good stock or not. There's so much randomness and there's so much time, and then now you have recency bias of the late. There's all this stuff that like changes your idea, even your memory of when you make that decision. For example, one thing I do with investments is I have this like investment like log where I write exactly why I bought something, just because before I felt like I would always excuse when I bought something. I'd be like, oh no, but at the time it was a good investment. Now I have the exact decision and I can really scrutinize it. Yeah, totally. But then, so how does that tie into, you know, advice or like the business world or entrepreneurship? Ideally, somebody would create this perfect simulation for all kinds of different entrepreneurship industries and ventures at every given scale. They don't exist. Maybe they're way too complicated to build. Maybe you need some sort of supercomputer to add in everything that needs to exist to essentially create the entrepreneurship game. But similarly, you want to just get as many like real reps and as much experience you can as possible. I think it's really hard to put oneself out there in entrepreneurship because, I mean, it can just be so embarrassing. It's directly tied to your name and your ego, and failure is not well understood by most non-entrepreneurs that haven't failed, or even entrepreneurs that, you know, are early on. This is another area, like you said, you know, if you failed a ton publicly in front of your friends in simulations, it's a great lesson to have. But even as an adult, like it's never too late to learn this lesson, which is you just gotta pretend you're a teen and do what you would as a teen. Whether that's some silly, you know, posts on LinkedIn to like try to get even one customer from your entire network, which might seem so embarrassing. It might seem like, no, I need to figure out like ads and I need to figure out the like professional way to do this. No. You're 12 again. How would you do it? You'd probably go knocking on doors. You'd probably pick up the phone. You'd probably embarrass yourself in 30 different ways. You got to start there. I want people to start earlier and earlier because it's easier when you're, you know, 14, 16, 17 to, you know, embarrass yourself. But if you're an adult, and I was much more of an adult when I started entrepreneurship. You got to start there, because I see it all the time where entrepreneurs don't do that and don't do that and don't do that, and they never become great entrepreneurs, because it's as if you are trying to learn some fundamental skill, but you never get the fundamentals. You never you never go into the gym to work out those muscles, because you feel like it's too embarrassing to do the like beginner exercises. No, the
Yeah.
beginner exercises where all the real learning is.
Yeah, and I think one thing you mentioned is like the more you can fail early on, the better, right? And it's like fall fast and hard, because the more you fail, the more you get used to the feeling of failure. And I think then it becomes not as big of a deal. But if you're doing something for the first time, it's the first time you're putting yourself out there, and the risk of failure is so much bigger in your head than it would be if you kept, if you had previously just like put yourself out there and tried and whatever. Which I actually would say, I almost disagree with you in saying like go back to when you were a teen, because I think me as a teen was actually quite insecure, and like I struggled with putting myself out there, and I struggled with like that whole image of, oh, well, what if I fail? So I think for me, it was the mindset shift first of becoming kind of confident in like who I am as a person and like what I could have to offer. And then once I got to that point was when, okay, well, hey, let's just try to do a podcast. Why not? Let's see what could happen. And then I realized like, wait, this is actually really fun, and I really enjoy, expressing myself, and it's a way for me to connect with other people, but also just share my own, mindset journey and everything.
Right.
So I think for anyone, no matter
What would you
where they
say?
are. Mm-hmm.
What would you say were the experiences that let you to sort of shift that mindset?
The last few months in France for me were really difficult, and I think I spent those last couple months wishing I was home and I was like ready to be done with it. And looking back, that was a silly thing to do, because wishing for the future, it's like it never comes. Like the only thing we actually have is like the present moment. So for me, it was really diving into this world of like presence and learning more about what presence actually is, and the ability to like try to accept, okay, I'm right where I need to be in this moment, and like this is all I can really see myself in. Like obviously we want to have vision and goals and everything, but at the end of the day, if you're too obsessed with that vision, or you're too obsessed with the past, you're not doing yourself any favors. So kind of coming back from France, I felt really lost like in some of my friendships, and I felt like I almost expected just everything to kind of pick up where it left off, and I didn't really consider like, oh, my friends have been living their life without me for a year. Yeah, we were texting and keeping in contact, but their lives aren't completely the same as it was. And that was really hard for me. So I ended up kind of like losing a few friendships, or just feeling really kind of negative and like upset. And I was like realizing I had wasted my last couple months in France, and I wasn't really present and just enjoying, like, wow, I'm in this beautiful country, like just be here, So that's kind of when my whole journey started of like being really present. And I think from there, more lessons, like I kind of start to shift my mindset to see things more optimistically and show up more positively and stop complaining, and like that, all of those things kind of compounded and led me to feel a lot more like secure in myself, I guess. And I think that's kind of been like leading me to my mission now, which is to help other people kind of go through this journey and this transformation of, hey, like you don't have to be like you've always been, and like just because you see the world in one way doesn't mean you always have to see it that way. And it doesn't mean you can't change if you really truly want to change and pivot and like improve yourself and improve your mindset, because I know, like mindset is so big and it relates to all these different things. And I think shifting my mindset allowed me to see like all these different areas of my life kind of open up, I guess.
That's so interesting. Yeah, totally. Yeah, there is some sort of just very personal mindset development that has to happen that I think is probably too unique for maybe like an educational program to do. You know what I mean? Like
For
we all have our
sure.
own journey. But I do believe also that, I mean, at least this is the case for me or for the students that I'm talking about, is that the more sort of real world skills they gain, or the more sort of competent they feel, whether it's in simulations or in competitions outside, like a robotics competition or whatever it is, that also builds a sense of confidence. And sometimes you have students that get that from more like the fact learning, like doing well on tests and things like that. But at least my subjective experience has been that doesn't last as long, or it doesn't go as deep with regards to the like a real confidence or a real like a strengthening of the mindset. Versus when students, like, I think there's this entire misunderstood area of like knowledge or like learning, which is, maybe I want to call it like the depth of learning, which is like if you learn something, for example, I many times throughout my like school journey like memorized something like the night before and then wrote it down, and I knew exactly sort of the way it was going to be asked like to me, and the way to write it so that I would get maximum points and all those things. And like knowing something but then also really understanding something and applying that and having real experience with that is very different. And I don't think we necessarily appreciate that much. But anyway, I'm going
Yeah.
off on a tangent.
No, that's okay. But that's interesting you say that, because it kind of comes back to like the whole thing of like metacognition, which is like knowing what you know. And
Right.
in education, we should be striving for students to be able to like think about, okay, well, how well could I explain this concept? Not just like, do I know it? Because there's
Yeah.
an article I read recently, and they were talking about the like difference between students' perceived readiness for an exam and then how they actually did. And they're like, well, I studied for hours. Like, how do I actually not know? Or how come I got all
Right.
this wrong? And it's like, well, we're thinking about things wrong. You shouldn't just be learning facts, but it needs to come from a place of, okay, think about your learning, think about the concepts, and like, how well could you explain this to someone else? Or how well do I actually understand this? Or could I explain this to a 12-year-old, you know? And it's like games and stuff help kids see things on a broader level. And I think I could have definitely used this type of environment when I was younger, you know, in my kind
Yeah.
of insecure stages of life where, again, I did really well in school, but it wasn't like I never really wanted to overly participate because I didn't want to seem like I was too smart. But then in certain
Right.
things, I didn't want to like, but I always wanted to do well. And I was very driven by, you know, just wanting to achieve. And I feel like overall I enjoyed my education experience, but I do feel like there was a level of me not wanting to take risk because it was
Right.
scary, and there wasn't that type of environment where taking risk was as encouraged as it kind of is starting to be now.
Right. Yeah, I can feel very finite when I talk to students about, oh, I have this test, and like, whatever letter grade you get is there forever. And I love talking to founders about this, because founders often have the idea that you can launch 100 times and you just need to get it right one time.
Mm,
You can succeed, you can fail 1,000 times, and if you're successful once, generally like that's a great success. Like
yeah.
that would what would that be like letter grade wise on like a test? It would be like you completely failed, and F minus if there's such a thing.
Yeah.
But in life, it would actually give you like a big A plus. So it
Hmm.
is interesting.
So kind of going or circling back to the whole concept of mindset
Hmm.
and how it connects to, you know, obviously education and your experience and wanting to create this space that's, you know, the best like non-traditional education. So what has
Yeah.
your experience with mindset been, or your journey to kind of get into, you know, like Tony Robbins and just like talking more about mindset? Like where did that kind of come in for you? And
Yeah.
what maybe does that look like now, or like what are kind of regular practices that you do to kind of keep your mindset feeling good, or especially if like as a business owner you need to have that kind of level of confidence, and some quarters might be great, some quarters might be lower. Like how does your mindset kind of center around just like your life in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. Oh man, I think it really all started with this presentation that this really awesome CEO, he's the CEO of Shopify, but just as an incredible human being, gave before he was very successful. He just happens to be from Ottawa, which is the city I was living at the time and I'm living at now. And he gave this local talk to maybe 50 people, and he talked about this idea about what is entrepreneurship and why do certain people or certain startups accomplish great things and why do others not? And of course, there's some luck and randomness in there too. But what is the like first principles behind that? Um, and it was a really great talk. I wouldn't be able to summarize it like perfectly in like a line or two, but the idea is that it's all related to sort of like the cumulative personal growth of the people that are striving towards changing something or building something, and that really like that is the predictor. Like that is it. There are certain people that happen to be at the right place at the right time at one point, and uh, create something that some people needed at one point. But in general, if you look at the examples of people that created something that was really impactful and empowering for a lot of people, and it's sort of like a big success story, generally you find that those people and that group of people were really, really, really heavily invested in their personal growth, meaning all kinds of things. They were just learning constantly, they were failing constantly, they tried 50 other things in the past that nobody ever speaks about. It's like the overnight success story, and that they were all very committed with one another. Like it was essentially a pure group of people lifting each other up, helping each other out, and really committed to this journey of growing, even more so sometimes than of building a great business or profit or marketing or whatever it is. They were just like, we want to grow our view of the world, our understanding of the world, and here's a problem that we are striving to solve. But as they grow their understanding of the world, they can solve that problem to a greater extent. So maybe they started off with what would have been just a small company, but because their personal growth grew and their mindset and everything and their understanding of the world and their knowledge of things, the way that they were able to scale, the way they solved that problem also grew. So there's like a really strong correlation between this. And I've seen it over and over again. Sometimes you talk to founders that are very successful and you sort of feel like, I don't know, like, have you really devoted your life to personal growth and mindset? But more times than not, that is the case, and it's like very fascinating people. So that sort of talk had a huge impact on me because that was sort of the belief that I had, but it was sort of unconscious. I didn't really was able to put it into words since I was a young kid, um, and that made it very clear for me. And from then I knew I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be building startups, working at startups, just trying to grow my understanding of the world and my personal growth as much as possible, always. Um, and that just leads you to eventually have to hit like mindset or how the brain and the connection between the brain and the body and your actions and all that stuff, because it's such a big puzzle piece of this puzzle of like what is the world, how do you understand things better, how do you become a better yourself, like a better form of yourself. It's impossible to avoid it. Eventually it like hits you really strongly in the face. And one analogy or one idea that I like to explore a lot, or like I think about a lot, that is sort of related, is this idea of, so if you take that further, this idea of like, okay, instead of looking for luck or these like opportunities, you better yourself, and you find the things that you're really passionate about and you try solving or creating value for different people, then like very clearly the question is, okay, how do you better yourself and what are the things that can better yourself? And an analogy I like to think about, because I think the entrepreneurship world is so crazy, everybody has different ways of looking at it, is I think this like athlete founder analogy, which is like if you ask 20 entrepreneurs or 30 people, okay, what should a founder be doing? How should they be approaching this? Like what's some advice? You will get like 30 different answers. But if you ask professional athletes or like somebody who's going to the Olympics for swimming or something like that, all right, what should I do if I want to be a professional swimmer, like go to the Olympics? The answer is going to be pretty like standard. It's going to be, you need to find like a world-class coach. You need to be fully immersed in the world. You need to be eating incredibly well, sleeping incredibly well. You need to be practicing these specific strokes in this specific way. You need to be training your mindset in like more than you think. And you stumble into these worlds of, why are there certain athletes that are less skilled and certain athletes that are more skilled, but these athletes become like best in the world, greatest of all time. Sometimes they were even like physically less capable. They're like just less athletic, less big, less strong, but they still become the greatest. And that those types of questions and that type of asking why leads you down crazy rabbit holes, of which it's a beautiful rabbit hole to go down, the mindset rabbit hole. But that's sort of like my path of how I got into exploring all kinds of books and seminars and everything around mindset.
Okay, I love that. I know something that you said that really resonated was like, if you ask 30 different people, you're going to get 30 different answers. And I think, so I'm starting my own coaching business, actually, mindset coaching.
Nice.
And
Awesome.
so thank you. But it's this thing where, okay, I've created this program and then I have like a one-off call kind of option. So I have kind of two options of how to work with me. And I'm at the very beginning of, okay, I'm ready to take on clients. And it's kind of like, okay, great. Where do I find them? And, there's so much different information out there of like, marketing strategy, this type of strategy, where to show up, where to talk about it, everything. Or then there's people who say, well, you need to just post on one social media, not all of them, because you're spreading yourself thin. And there's all this different advice. And I'm at that point of, I don't have like a business background. So I'm learning all of this as I go. And I had a session with a business coach that I know kind of at the beginning to help me kind of come up with my idea and my, the clarity around what I want to do and like my why and like how is that going to manifest. And that led me to kind of create the coaching program I created. And then now I'm back to that, okay, maybe I need more help of like how to actually get this going. But it's like, yeah, there's so much sources on the internet. And I think I'm even having this today where I feel like, okay, there's so much noise and I'm having this overwhelmed feeling of like, okay, I need to take a step back almost because there's just like so much information that I've been trying to consume about it and just like learn as much as I can. And that goes back to the whole personal growth. Like for me, it's just, I'm excited and it's something I'm like, I see myself being successful in this and I know I'm going to, really help people and I really believe in what I'm doing. But it's like when you're at the beginning and you can't quite see it yet, it's like you can see it, but you're like, I'm not quite sure what's my next step. Is like, that's like kind of, or you're hitting like a block in the road. Like that's kind of where I'm at right now. And I keep having to remind myself, okay, like practice what you preach in a way of like, okay, if this was you and you were coaching you, like what would be some strategies that you would help other people with? You know what I mean? And it's interesting.
What would you say? What would you say to yourself?
I mean, yeah, see, I said that I haven't actually thought about it. I think I would tell myself, like, okay, you're overwhelmed right now with all the information. Like, take a step back and maybe take a day off your phone or off social media and stop consuming all the different possible strategies and kind of sit with what you already know and sit with, yourself for a bit and just, again, come back to presence of like, okay, sometimes you have to let answers come to you. And I think when we're kind of searching, or we're trying something, it's not working, that's when that frustration, like sometimes you have to kind of take a step back. So that's kind of the space I'm in right now. And it's funny because I dyed my hair the other day. It probably doesn't look so different, or you wouldn't probably know, but like it's really dark. Like it's super dark. So then that was also a thing. I'm like, I'm looking in the mirror and I'm like not seeing myself. Like I'm just having this whole day of like, who am I, So yeah, I think the answer is like, let's take a step back and also know like Rome wasn't built in a day. And like, you don't have to suddenly have 10 clients tomorrow. You know what I mean? And I think
nobody does.
Exactly.
Unless you're already famous.
Yeah. And it's like, I hosted like my first kind of community like webinar the other week, and that was on resilience. Yeah. And honestly, I think it went really well. It was a small group of us, but like everyone spoke. We heard everyone's voice. Everyone was like engaged. And that was just like a free call. And I'm hoping to do one kind of monthly. But like, even that, I'm like, that went well. Like, celebrate that. It doesn't mean like everyone from that call is going to suddenly sign up for like, your offerings. But it's like letting that just be a successful thing and not feeling like, okay, but like now what? Right away, And I think that comes back of like this spirit of always wanting to improve is I think some people get caught in, okay, what's next? I'm ready. And then nothing comes. And sometimes it just doesn't work like that, I guess. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's my ramble. That's where I'm at. What do you think?
No, I think it's great. Yeah, I think what you said is 100% right. And it sort of connects to what we were saying before, like my advice from before, which is I think there's just like, there's like an expectation of what like entrepreneurship or like business or success is supposed to look like, and it's just narrative fallacy. It's just like the stories that you think are true. Me and my partner are actually gonna have a baby.
Oh my God. Actually, I was going to talk to you about this. Not like knowing you were having a baby, but I was going to ask you something about if you have kids. So I'll ask you after. But that's exciting. Continue.
Yeah,
Sorry, I got excited for you.
but the craziest thing is learning about the entire process and giving birth, and we have a doula, and just like so much information has been consumed. But the most surprising part is that this idea that like women give birth on their back, like in horrible pain, just screaming, and that's not that's the movie version of birth, and that it can be completely different, and it mostly and often is completely different. um, that's crazy, because if you ask me like how my certainty of what giving birth is like, I felt very, very confident I knew.
That it's
But where
horrible.
did that
Yeah.
come from? That it's on your back, it's like legs up, like there's a bunch of people with like wearing like blue and like the typical like movie
Yeah.
scene. I was so confident it's that, and I'm like, oh man, it's horrible. Like this is gonna be one of the roughest days, but then gonna be very exciting because there's a baby.
Yeah.
Apparently, this is like the Hollywood like movie way of portraying it, and it's not. It's not true. Crazy, big shock. I think it's the exact same for business and entrepreneurship. There's this idea of what it's supposed to be. First of all, that it's supposed to be really hard in certain ways, but then also that it happens so quickly and it's so easy, and like if you have anything good, it's gonna like blow up immediately and you're gonna go viral and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just never true. I'm sort of like a student of like founding stories and companies and founders. Like it's probably the thing I nerd out on the most, which is like, how did this company start? What was it actually like? What were the actual conversations like? Is there some track record? Can I read through the Slack of when this company actually started and what were the conversations?
Yeah.
And like
Did
the
you watch
idea of what happens.
Sorry,
Which
did
one?
you watch the movie about Nike with Michael
No,
Jordan?
I don't think I have.
Oh, it's like the company, it's like how Nike got started, and like how they were kind of failing, and then they got Michael Jordan to sign, and then it became like the most successful thing. Matt Damon's
Oh,
in
okay,
it,
cool.
and Ben Affleck. Is it Matt Damon? I think it is. I think you'd like it. It's pretty good. It's like you get super excited about a shoe, and it's like, why am
Yeah.
I this excited about the shoes? But like, because it's Michael Jordan.
I think it's based on the Phil Knight like Shoe Dog book, right?
That I'm not sure, but
Okay.
could be.
But anyway, okay,
I
I'll
forget
definitely
what
check
it's
it out. I think
called,
it's
but
based on
anyways, I think you'll like it.
right. But anyway, so long story short, what you said is completely right, which is if you're even like 1% close to getting some access to a few people and maybe even getting a client, any progress is great progress. Any progress, you need to be celebrating it. You need to be excited about it. You shouldn't be comparing yourself to any idea of success or how like, where you should be at in a month or 2 months from now. It's just making it an exciting journey for yourself, making it so that you feel like work is pleasurable and enjoying like the journey. The more you can trick yourself into just being like, this is exciting, this is awesome, and I'm doing great. Even if you're not, like, if you
Yeah.
start thinking I'm not doing great, good luck, like actually doing great, right? I think
exactly. No, I love that. And I think even like after the webinar, I'm like, you know what, that actually went really well. And I was excited. And like, I called my mom and I told her how it went. And like,
yeah,
I've been lucky to have a lot of really like supportive people around me, and like people just being like, yeah, Vic, go for it. Like, why not? And I think that's such a huge part of it, is surrounding yourself with people who will kind of support you and cheer you on. But yeah, then I think it's so normal though. Everyone falls into these patterns of like highs and lows. And
yeah.
I think letting myself kind of feel it today and just like be confused and then like let it go and be like, okay, but like still let's work to that, like just get 1% better every day, whatever that looks like. And I think that can do a lot for you. And this is the whole thing about like why I want to help people with mindset too, is because I know how strong you can be when you build up resilience and you tell yourself you got this, or you believe in yourself.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you want, I can give you sort of my 80-20, like the 20% of things that I feel like I've learned or I understand about mindset that I apply like every day, or like like the thing that I think is is the thing that's changed my life the most. And really the big word there, like the big concept is around state, like which state you're in. And it's hard to even describe because it's such a like almost non-verbal thing. It's such a like in the moment feel, such a like physiological thing, but we can try talking about it. Um, One like thing I like to think about is like, do you believe like every person has the ability, like possesses the ability to at least once in their life be in like an incredible like peak state, like a beautiful state, just feel incredible? Like, do you think that as Victoria?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
do.
I think so too. I think it's part of like human nature.
Yeah.
Um, and then so like the follow up to that is okay, if people possess that ability, like it's within them to do that, then really what's going on is we just don't have the skills or strategy to get into that state. Like I think most people, including myself, for a long time, sometimes got into that state and I didn't even know how. Like it was like something great happened, somebody called me that I hadn't talked to in years, and like just enough things lined up that just made my day, and all of a sudden I was feeling incredible.
Like the physiological state of just being like your vibrations are high and you're like exuding this like energy. Like, is that what you would define almost as like this state for someone listening who's like, well, what do they mean by like the highest possible state? And I know you
Yes,
said it's hard
yes.
to explain, but
I think everybody can relate. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like when life comes easy to you, you feel great. Like negativity bounces right off you. You just like
mm,
your future's compelling. You're enjoying the moment. There's nothing can stop you. You're fully present. Everybody's had a moment where even if it was a long time ago, even if it was as a kid, but everybody's had a moment where they were just like, oh, like you can see
yes.
things in slow motion, like maybe you scored like an amazing soccer goal, but like whatever it is,
Yes. Okay.
um,
I feel it. I can
you
feel it, you saying it. Yeah.
and then so the question is like, okay, is that something that just sort of happens? Like it's like a cosmic ray that hits you, and like we only get like 7 of them, in our lives. Like we better pray like the next one comes soon. And I think the answer is no. And I'm very convinced of it because I've been getting into those states more and more and more and more to the point where it's almost like on command. Um, and the idea is that, which is, okay, so if people can have the ability to do that, we're lacking the strategy or the skill to be able to get into that state. And then what I was just thinking about actually driving here in the snowstorm, I was like, how valuable would it be to have this like little button that like maybe fits in your pocket? You can just carry it around and you can press it and you get into that state like anytime you want. You
Mm,
can just press this unlimited amount of time. There's no reset.
okay. Interesting. I don't know
How
if
life
that
changing
would
would it be like
be.
for you?
Yeah. I mean, would it be good though to just be able to do it so on demand? Like, do you think this is a state where people can stay in for like long periods of time? Like, I know you've been saying you've been
Pers-
getting into it more
yeah.
confident. Yeah. Like, what do you think about that?
Personally, I think yes.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So I think because it's such a rare thing, we essentially have to create an explanation or almost like a story around it,
Mm,
and it has to be like sort of like an empowering story, which is, we only have so much energy, we can only do so much. Like the reason I don't have that right now is because of some reason, which is like a positive reason. I think that's not true. I think it's just a matter of like lack of skill. And I
okay.
do think it's like a black and white thing. I think it's just the more the better. I've never regretted being in this state. I've never felt like, oh man, I should have saved that for like tomorrow, right? Because I actually think it compounds. I think the more you have of it, the more you can do
Mm,
it, it actually grows. It's sort of like, um, do you meditate?
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I view it very similarly. Where like the more you meditate, the actually deeper and better the meditation becomes. And you're not running out of this like meditation meter where like, oh, if I meditate a lot this year, next year is going to be worse. Actually, next year is going to be
Mm,
even better with regards to
yes.
meditation. You're going to go deeper. It's going to be easier to get into the meditation state and into the flow of things, and it just gets better and better. And I think it's the same thing for state.
Okay.
Um, yeah, maybe a bit
Interesting.
controversial. I don't know,
Well, it makes
but
me
but
think
then
of. No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
no, no, no. You please, please.
Okay. I was going to say, it makes me think of like just like mindset in general, like presence. It's like the more present you are.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like you never regret being not, like you would never regret being like present in this moment. And something I like to do to kind of ground myself in presence, or if I feel like my brain is like, you know, bombarding me with thoughts, or I'm worried about the future, I'm thinking like, that's when I come back and I'm like, okay, what's something I can do, like a little task I can do around the house, and like I will focus all my energy on that task. Like let's say it's like washing the dishes, and it's like, okay, I'm literally watching the bubbles, or I'm like seeing like the stuff wash off, or like I'm like feeling the sponge in my hand, like whatever it is, to like use as much of your senses as possible to like do that task at hand. Like you can't have any energy going anywhere else. And I think that's a really good like kind of tool or trick to kind of come back to this moment. And then I always ask myself like, okay, where I am right now, is there a problem? Like me washing these dishes, focusing on it, like at the end of the day, like no, I'm just washing the dishes. So I think that it kind of comes back, or that's probably the idea of like the state you're in a way of just being able to be present allows you to kind of help melt away those other worries. And I feel like then you're in a state where you can take positive action. Because as soon as we're worried and we're like spiraling, even like I was doing today, it's like I can't take positive action in this state. Like it's just not going to happen. Yeah. So it's like that's when you need to kind of, take that step back. And so what type of things help you get into that state? Or for someone listening who's like, I want to feel good. Like, what can I physiologically, what can I physiologically do to kind of get me into that state?
Yeah. So just to wrap up on the state thing, I think it's like, this is the biggest life hack. I think the more you can get into a beautiful state, the more fulfilled and like a happier life you will have, the more successful you will be, the more everything, like what is this state? Like you said, it's a state of mindfulness, of being grateful, of being present. It's a state of wanting to give, of abundance. It's just all the greatest values and qualities of you sort of grow and get exemplified like outwardly, and all your limiting beliefs, any negativity, all your doubts shrink and almost vanish for however long you're in that state. And I'm at the point where like this is my number one thing in life. It's like, let's say I have an important business decision to make, or I have like something terrible happens and I need to like react, like maybe with my family or the car, like we had like car problems a couple days ago, whatever. And instead of like thinking about, okay, how do I solve this? My immediate thought now is, how do I get into an amazing state right now? Because I know Felipe in an amazing state is like car problems, please.
Almost.
Yeah. Business, like problem, that's a fun game I'm playing. You know, this is just a video game that's business. That's how Felipe in a great state thinks, and anything is no problem. Versus if I start thinking of the problem solving, next thing you know, the problems multiply and there's problems everywhere. And like you said, there's so much information, and all of a sudden I'm overwhelmed, not in a good state, and then things are the reverse of being in a good state. I actually wrote this down somewhere like recently as a reminder to myself, which is, I'm going to butcher it, but I'm quoting myself. This is ridiculous.
That's okay. Quoting yourself and like, getting it wrong.
Something along the lines, I have it written down at in my actual office at home. I had to come here because of the power outage.
Yeah.
But it's, if you have like problems, or if you have problems that would easily be solved in like your peak state, in your beautiful state, then you actually don't have problems. You just have not being in a beautiful state problems. And like that belief is so like fundamental to who I am now. Going back to what I just said, which is like, whenever I have a problem, whenever I get even a little bit stressed, now I've just like tricked myself into immediately thinking, oh, this is not a problem. This is just I'm not in a great state problem. And it's changed my life. I think it's going to be, when we look back at it, hopefully we do a podcast in like 5 years or so. It's going to be the secret sauce. It's going to be the thing that like I will give all the credit to for happiness and success and fulfillment in my life. So yeah, how do you get into a beautiful state?
Yeah.
It's hard. It's not actually hard. I just mean, how do you consistently, it's a practice. It's something you need to develop. It's like, how do you get into great shape? Well, I mean, you can say it's easy, just do these exercises, go to the gym every day or whatever. So to some extent it's simple, but it's hard to do it and stick with it. Although I think it's much easier to do it with the state thing because it's such an immediate great feeling. The problem is our like mind blocks us from doing some of these things because we have limiting beliefs and because some of them are a little ridiculous. Uh, so for example, um, like the pillars to being like in a great state or just for energy in general, which are very highly related. If you feel like you're very energetic, like you had great sleep, things are like you feel like you can go all day long and work or do things and run errands and all that stuff, generally it's because you're in a good state. And whenever you're feeling like, oh man, today I woke up on the wrong like side of the bed or with the wrong foot or whatever the expression is, generally you're in a worse state and it makes you feel more lethargic. It makes you feel like things are more difficult. Um, yeah, those pillars are like physiology, like what you do with your body. Um, and one interesting like word thing is like the word like emotion actually comes from the word motion, right? It's the same word with the e, and what you feel and how you perceive things has a lot to do with the way you move your body. Of course, posture, but so much more. So you can completely trick your nervous system into being almost all the way to a peak state just by using your body. And it sounds ridiculous, but you can just go crazy. You can jump around. You can celebrate as if you just won the lottery. You can really put yourself into, I mean, there's so much research into power poses, right?
Yeah, I was going to say the
They're
power
effective.
pose.
But you can go way beyond power poses. Power poses very effective. Power poses plus music and jumping and really celebrating and really feeling it and visualizing it, much more powerful than just the power pose. And we know because of research and real studies how powerful power poses are already. They like decrease drastically your cortisol levels, increase all kinds of confidence levels, and et cetera, et cetera. So physiology, your body, how you use your body, huge thing. Deep topic. There's entire books on this. The other thing is focus, like you were just talking about, focusing, being in the moment, particularly the things you focus on. Gratitude is huge here. In every given moment, we're sort of choosing, or even subconsciously, like our body is choosing certain things we focus on. And what we focus on gets magnified. So if we're focusing on having fun, on success, on wins, if we're focusing on solutions, they magnify. And it actually really matters what you focus on. People like, I didn't understand this at all. I was just like, well, I'm just focused on whatever like I need to be able to do right now to make the business grow or whatever. Completely the wrong approach, right? Like, no, I need to engineer the things I'm focusing on, which are the things that I want, which are the things that are, like the positive things that will give me more energy, put me in these states more often, and then it'll be easy to focus on even more things, and it's like a cycle. Just how it's a really easy cycle to get depressed and down on yourself and beat yourself up and all that stuff, it also works the other way around. You can really reinforce positivity, energy, state, things become easy, you solve things. Then by solving a bunch of problems, making progress, being great to other people, then you feel really good about yourself, and it just, oof, you're off to the races. So physiology, what you focus on. There was another thing I wanted to talk about with focus, but you essentially can't be like sad or depressed if you are focusing on things that you're grateful for. So it's one quick way to like hack your brain. If you just train yourself to be able to think of 5 things, 10 things, 20 things that you're grateful for, small things, big things, medium things, you can very quickly rewire your brain to go from I'm worried, I'm stressed to I'm not. Especially if at the same time you're jumping around celebrating, you have like your power music going and you're doing other things. Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, a second ago I mentioned like focusing on solutions. Words are like so important. So that's the third here, like the language that you use, and essentially language is what gives things meaning, is another huge thing. So before I always talked about, problem solving, and I used to think myself as like a great problem solver, and I'm always sort of anticipating what problems are happening, and I was like, the reason I was a good entrepreneur is because I'm a good problem solver and I'm very problem orientated. Just shifting that to like solution orientated, it's the exact same thing, but it completely changes your life. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that, because again, what you focus on is what gets magnified. If you focus on solutions, you're going to start seeing opportunity solutions all the time. If you focus on problems, even though it's the same thing, you will see an abundance of problems arise all the time. I feel like you want to jump in on these things. Tell me what you
Yeah,
think so
no,
far.
it's interesting. I love that you said that. And I think what's interesting about what you said is like, okay, physiological, kind of like actions, okay, our thoughts and our
Yeah.
words. My coaching program is literally taking people on that journey of, okay, we're shifting your thoughts, your words, and then into your actions and like how to
Nice.
take intentional action. So I totally relate to, what you're saying about the state thing. And I think something that I also talk about is like, yeah, if you're like at a block, you're feeling blocked, you're having like a weird, like you can't figure something out. I often say like, yeah, like put on a song and like dance around. Like put on your favorite song and just like listen to the music and like dance or whatever. So like that's like totally getting yourself into state. I think I just like haven't had the words to like think about what that actually means. I do want to talk about what you said about gratitude is like gratitude for me has been this a huge thing. Like I have a gratitude journal and it's like every morning you write like maybe one or two things you're grateful for. You can write like your action items for the day. So just help you be like, okay, what am I trying to accomplish? Maybe a couple things. And then there's a space to come back at the end of the day, 3 good things about today. So it's like no matter how the day went, you can try to think of 3 good things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they could be big, small, whatever. And I find the weeks that I'm consistent filling out that journal and like thinking about it actively, I feel way better. I'm way happier. And I start looking for those little things throughout the day. Like I'm on a walk and like I see
You're like,
a
check.
bird. I see a pretty
Yeah.
bird. I'm like, oh, I could write that in my journal. This is a great
Exactly.
moment, right? And you start like noticing the
Yeah.
small things you wouldn't normally notice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love all those things. I think that's super important. And I think like physiologically for me, it's been like, okay, I'm an avid like gym goer and like I love working out. And like for me, that like helps me stay, I think, in an
Mm-hmm.
overall productive feeling or like higher state because I'm always looking for ways to like move my body, I guess. But it's
Mm-hmm.
good to know like, okay, but you also need to do it, do it intentionally and like especially in the moments where you need to kind of get into a good state. It's like, yeah, jump around, think about positive things, say affirmations. Like if you can join all those things together all in one, it sounds
Yeah.
like that is like
And it
super
does sound
powerful.
ridiculous.
No, but it's,
It does
yeah,
sound ridiculous.
but like I totally
Yeah.
know and believe you when you say like it does work.
It's
Yeah.
crazy effective. You can go from feeling like it's the worst day of your life to just feeling like you're completely unstoppable in like 30 seconds. It's
Wow.
crazy. It's crazy, crazy, crazy. The problem is when you're in that really negative state, you convince yourself that that's not possible. You convince
Yes.
yourself, oh, this mindset crap. Like, if it's so great, how could I ever get into this negative state, right? Like, clearly that stuff
Mm-hmm.
must not be legit, whatever, whatever. But those are the moments where practice is the most important. You almost should see them as opportunities. Like today, the whole storm and almost not being able to talk to you today, I was just like, oh yeah, like this is like, we're talking about mindset. If I let this
Yeah.
frustrate me right now, the fact that there's like a power outage for the last day, then like, what is the point of this conversation even? This is a
Yeah.
great opportunity for me to practice mindset. I mean, this
Yeah.
is exciting and it was cool. And fortunately, I didn't let it get me down. And if I let it get me down, I would have screamed like crazy, like yes, I would have celebrated as if I just won
Yeah.
the lottery. I would have done a bunch of other things. There's some really powerful breathing techniques. There's all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
Um,
I love it.
the language one, just to wrap on the language, was kind of like our
Yeah.
third pillar. So powerful. What did I mention about language so far? I guess just like the words, right?
Yeah, just like
Um,
words give things meaning, is what you said.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And like our like nervous system or our body really doesn't distinguish between these things. I think Andre talked about this a little bit in your pod where he was giving some examples where Tony Robbins was doing some interventions with people. He was talking to some people about things that were really like stressing them out, and people were talking about how, oh, like my business partner like stabbed me in the back, right? Like, and he
Mm.
gave that example.
Yeah.
It's exactly that, but for everything. Constantly in conversation, and especially in conversation with ourselves. That one's the even harder one to pick up on. We're so like deprecating to ourselves. We're so negative to ourselves.
Yeah.
I don't think no matter how positive of a person you are, no matter how like you have resting like smile face, I think we all have negative thoughts that we say to ourselves, or when we do something, we're like, oh, you're so dumb or whatever. Training yourself to remove that and to not use negative and not use negative exaggerations or sort of dramatic words when they're unnecessary, which almost always they are necessary, really changes the way your body perceives the meaning of everything going around you, which is a way more important thing than people think. People think like, oh, if I just don't say like something negative, like intellectually, like yeah, sure, in the long haul, it'll make a little bit of a difference. But no, it's all about how your body perceives things, and it's all about going back to that physiology. Because if you just had a couple of negative thoughts and you've been like, like this bad posture, you've been, I don't know, you didn't eat well, you didn't sleep well, you didn't do your gratitude, you didn't meditate, haven't done any breathing practices, you're in like you haven't done anything, and then all of a sudden you start jumping around. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Will it actually like increase your state? Yes, but it will go from 0 to 10 instead of like all the way to 100 where you want to be. So it does all need to come together, which is it's tricky. But when you start doing it, and once you get that experience of like, wait, right now I'm like really depressed. Let me like see how quickly I can get out of this, and let's treat this as a challenge, and let's see how quickly I can get into like what is almost like the greatest state I've ever been in. That is like completely life changing, and it's one of those things where you just can't look back when you do that. Yeah.
I love that. And I think it's what you've been talking about that's really resonating is like the interconnectedness of like all of these things. Like we could talk about that, the interconnectedness with like, okay, your thoughts, your words, your actions, like the physiological state, but it has to match up with the way you're thinking. Like, yeah, if you jump around, cool. But if you're still telling yourself you're stupid for like making one mistake, then you're not getting the full picture, right? So I think, it's all these things that work together. In the book, The Power of the Subconscious Mind, the author, I think, is Joseph Murphy, but he talks about how our subconscious mind actually takes everything literally. Like it can't distinguish between like sarcasm or jokes and like truth. So the things you tell yourself subconsciously actually do become your beliefs. And I think that's why it's so important to positively affirm yourself. And like you said, focus on solutions, and suddenly you're going to start seeing solutions because your brain is literally being trained to look for that. So I think it's such an interesting thing, and I appreciate all your insight of like, okay, how can we combine these things together and how they're all related?
Yeah, like for like these three things, your physiology, what you focus on, the things you think, the emotions, and then your language. I think a common trap is to not like, it goes in that order. It needs to be like body first, then focus, then language. I think a common like pitfall or almost like a limiting belief or like a blocker is to try to solve the wrong things first, or focus again on the problems, or like, okay, my problem is the like language thing, my problem is this. It almost always starts with the body. So you have to get into this like physical practice, whatever it is. There's a few things. It's not just jumping around, but you got to start with the body, because we have the body, and then we have obviously our thoughts and our brain, prefrontal cortex, whatever, like you want to, however you want to think about it. And it talks one way, like if the body feels horrible, like you can't trick yourself into thinking happy thoughts. Affirmations to some extent like don't work if you don't have the body part figured out. It needs to go in conjunction, but the body part is more important. So even with regards to gratitude or affirmations, this is the thing like Tony is huge on, is like he essentially says like affirmations don't work. I'll explain. They definitely work, but he goes a little further. He's like, if let's say you have like weeds in the garden, and you just say, I don't have weeds in the garden, I don't have weeds in the garden, you still have weeds in the garden. If you have some horrible problem causing you issues in your relationship, in your business, you can't just think your way out of it. But what you need to do is you need to actually feel and embody and really like, he calls them incantations. And you need to like feel all the emotions and get into the state, and then you can do your affirmations. But it's a small part of it. And the body part and the feeling it and the visualizing part is actually even more important than the words, because the words are really important, but they're third. So you gotta get your body into that correct position, do the correct breathing, do the correct stance, do the correct feeling. Like, again, maybe it's a lot of movement to get the right emotions. Again, emotions, and then focus, of course, on the right things. And then the words and everything you tell yourself needs to be consistent, because you need to be consistent so that your two brains and your two bodies communicate well with one another. But there's a lot of these pitfalls. I actually like jotted some down, especially for like entrepreneurs. And I'm talking about myself. I'm talking about like all the things that I did wrong, which I think are actually the common things, which are the main one that I've completely changed like my philosophy on or my life on is this idea that you being like really hard on yourself or hard on others is this like secret to success. That the reason that, you know, like Steve Jobs or some of these people were so successful is because they had such a high bar that nothing ever satisfied them, and they would yell at people and they would treat people poorly. But this is like they had some hole inside of them that they needed to fill, and like the way they did that is by building like the greatest iPhone or the greatest computer or the greatest thing ever. And I used to act a lot in that way. I used to just we would make some progress with previous startups or our current startup, and I was always like, I mean, good. I mean, we made a little progress, but you know, this game is still crap. And the kids would love it, and the parents would love it, and everything was going really well. But I was like, oh man, I would just see what it could be, and I would just beat myself up for it. And I'm like, we're not moving fast enough. And I always thought that was my superpower. I thought that was like this perfectionism, this like self-deprecation of like pushing myself to do more and more and more was this thing that was like the reason I was going to be successful. And what I've really learned, and I believe more than anything, is that this like negativity or thinking about things from this perfectionist or just negative way, however you want to explain it to yourself, is a fuel. It definitely has led some people. You can argue maybe there was luck there or not, but it's definitely a type of fuel. It's not the best fuel. There's a much better fuel, which is actually comes from positivity, from celebrating things, from reinforcing things, from training your body to like seek pleasure in work and relationships and doing things well and being in a great state and going to the gym and eating well and all these things. We can condition ourselves much more strongly, and we get much more energy from thinking about things positively and approaching things positively than negatively. And it's very counterintuitive. I think if you talk to almost all founders, especially like engineering type founders, they don't believe in the like positive crap. They're like, I'm here to like write code and solve problems, and they're stressed and they're like, oh, this is not good enough. And that's a fuel, but it's not the right fuel. The reason is it depletes you of energy. It doesn't allow you to get into this great state. And again, if you have any problem that you could solve in a great state, you don't have a problem. You actually just have a state problem. And most entrepreneurs, most founders, even more so technical founders, because they're more in their head, never get into those peak states where things are easy, because they're just constantly, grinding in almost a sort of negative way. And they never celebrate. And they always think, once we raise this money, or once we have this amount of customers, once we make this amount of money, once we're like married, they always think of this future situation in which they're going to celebrate and they're going to be happy. But guess what? If you've trained for 20, 30, 40 years to not be happy and to be hard on yourself, the moment you make all this money or whatever, you're going to feel exactly the same way. You need to start it today. Much more energy, much easier to be in a state. People are going to notice. Things are going to be easier. You're going to feel much better. It's just much stronger of a fuel. And just thinking about those as two fuels, and that if you're using the negative fuel, yes, it's a fuel and it can drive you a little bit, but you're driving a gas car with like diesel in it or whatever. It's going to break down.
Well, I think we might end off with that thought. Honestly, we're getting really long here, but it's been great. Honestly, thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you everyone for listening. Any parents out there, definitely check out Quest, because it could be a great educational option for your child. Actually, what ages of kids do you host on the platform?
8 to 11.
Okay, 8 to 11. Yeah. Good to know.
If your kids are not fully challenged by school, or if they like building things, if they like creating things, Quest is the place for them for sure.
Okay, I love it. All right, thanks everyone. We'll see you next time.